And Leslie, I'll let you know when the recording is ready and good to go. Okie dokie. Hey.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Yes, it works. Oh, no.
All right, just one moment. Just to make sure this goes through. And we should be doing well. So, welcome to those of you who are new and just joining us now. My name is Amy Curcio, and I work with Leslie at TLC. We're happy to have today Dr. Renae Reinardy. We're very, very lucky. She, powerhouse. So she is a member of TLC's board of directors and of our clinical training faculty. She's a cognitive behavioral therapist who takes a holistic approach to BFRB treatment. And she owns a private practice in Fargo, North Dakota. She's also very recently the Mom of the Year. So I wanted to just mention that. It's an amazing accomplishment. And Dr. Reinardy presents at nearly all of our events, and we could not be more grateful that she's here with us today. So with that, this is going to be a little bit different than our last webinar. We're going to be taking questions. So you can either use the Q&A at the bottom of your control bar, or you can also post your questions in chat. And Leslie and I will be helping out with the discussion sort of in a co-moderating way. But Dr. Reinardy, if you'd like to take it away, that would be wonderful.
I would be happy to. Hello, everybody. I'm so honored to be here with you all across the globe from what I understand. So this is fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you, TLC Foundation for BFRBs for doing this. I mean, how amazing that they were able to put this together so quickly. So be sure to show them some love with some donations and volunteering or whatever you can do with them, or sharing these resources with other people, because as we all know, well, hopefully we all know, you're not alone. So there's millions and millions and millions of people who are also struggling with BFRBs. And I think it's beautiful that we're able to come together like this and talk about some of the common things that people experience with BFRBs. And when we look at, kind of how things are going lately, there's a lot of emotions that people are experiencing. Anxiety, of course, is a really high one. That's normal. I think most people feel some level of anxiety, some level of uncertainty. And if you've been home under quarantine or isolation or just practicing, staying in more, maybe a little boredom, right? So, and the reason why this is especially important to talk about for our kind of family of folks with BFRBs is we look at, like, what are the triggers, what are the behaviors, what are the consequences, or what's called the ABCs, antecedents, behaviors, and consequences that are involved with body-focused repetitive behaviors. Antecedents, the triggers that we oftentimes find, are emotional triggers. Raise your hand if anxiety is one of your emotional triggers for BFRB, or boredom, or uncertainty, or any of the other emotions that have been a little bit higher lately. So, so that's why I'm so happy to be able to jump on board and talk a little bit about some resources that we can use to help decrease some of that anxiety that we're experiencing. We'll also talk a little bit about boredom and uncertainty and stuff as we go too. So, so here's what I had in mind for today. I do want to answer people's questions. I do have structure, though, for what I'd like to talk about as well. So I have a lot of skills that I would like to share with you guys. I'm, so happy to have the job that I am. I get to work with fantastic people, and I get to learn and practice some really fantastic skills. And that's what I want to share with you over this next hour, is talking a little bit about the comprehensive behavioral model for body focused repetitive behaviors. And this is a really, really great model that was designed and actually is talked about in this book. I don't know if Amazon's still working or not, but if it is, I'd recommend it to reach out and take a look at this resource. And it's going to cover some of the things I'm going to talk about. I might attempt to do screen sharing here, so be forewarned. I'm not great at technology, but let's give it a go and see if it works. Okay, can you guys see that? So what this form is here is this just talks a little bit about scam.
I don't see anything, actually.
Oh, you don't see anything?
Mm-mm.
All right. Well, we may not. Oh, okay. You know what? I found something. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to give it just one more attempt, and if it works, great. If not, I'll just describe it to you guys. Okay. Do you see it now?
That seems to have worked. Yeah, you might want to.
Oh my
you might
gosh,
want
it's amazing! Isn't this so cool, you guys, that we can do this?
I want to zoom in.
Forcing us
Text
to
is
step
pretty
outside
small.
of our comfort zone. It's small.
Yeah, you can probably you can zoom in a little bit.
Okay, let me see. Can you see it now?
Oh yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Reinardy.
Awesome. So, so bear with me just a little bit. So this is a handout that we give out in some of our trainings and stuff too that I wanted to share with you. I don't think my colleagues will be upset with me that I decided to take that liberty. But the comprehensive behavioral model, and we're going to cover 2 of these in more detail, just talks a little bit, and it sounds like there was some comments and questions about this yesterday, so I decided to integrate it into my talk. Just the different skills that we can use when we have a BFRB. So looking at the sensory domain and things that we can do to help when we have a lot of sensory triggers. So other ways to get sensory input. And there's a lot of ways to be able to do that. Can you guys still see me too, or just the handout?
No, we're able to see you too.
Okay, great. So like, you know, things like this, right? So just kind of, in this one, we can integrate a couple things. It's a sensory experience, right? We're visual, we're looking at things, we're touching things. You can also integrate breath in with this. So when I do this in my office, I have people like breathe in, breathe out. And it's something that we're able to integrate a couple of these different modalities off of SCAMP. So SCAMP stands for sensory, cognitive, affective, motor, and place. And we'll talk about each just briefly and then go and spend more time on the cognitive piece. But sensory stuff is important. A lot of people with BFRBs, not everybody likes this. It's fine if this doesn't apply to you. But a lot of people need a little extra sensory something, right? So, and look to see what your sensory preferences are. I personally like the clickety-clackety things. But some people like things that, you know, do things like this, right? So a little bit of noise, squeezing action. You know, there's endless possibilities out there. Some people really like soft things, like a soft little plushie, can feel good to, you know, rub up against wherever you might pull from or pick from, and you know, you keep those fingertips happy, right? So this is a really cool thing. I'm going to show this just on my screen. If anyone here it is. If any of you have ever taken a neuropsych class, you probably learned about homunculus man. So this is what our brain thinks that we look like, all right? Look at those hands, right? So I put pants on them since this is a family show. But it's something that, you know, look at the mouth, look at the hands, right? So, and yes, of course, the bikini area is involved there too. And these are areas that are oftentimes found in BFRBs. And our hands are so active. So that's why when we use sensory substitutes, we try to kind of meet those sensory needs, because most of our nerve and sensory processing is in our fingertips, as indicated by this model. So that's why the sensory component is important for a lot of people. The cognitive component is looking at our different thought processes that we have. And we're going to spend some time on this one today because I think it's really important, especially with what's going on right now in our world. So, we make the best out of it. Actually, my cup today, it's ironic. It's Prince, dearly beloved. What does it say? We are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Kiss, hug, Prince, right? So, and I think that that's so true. We are gathering together to try to get through this as a collective whole as human beings, right? So the cognitive part of it, what we tell ourselves during this time and any time is really, really important. The affective realm of SCAMP is also a great thing to be familiar with. This is the emotional part of it. So we're just talking about the sensory part, the cognitive part. Now it's the affective part, right? What are these emotions? This is where the anxiety comes in, the uncertainty, the fear, the boredom, the loneliness, all of that stuff that can happen, especially now, right? So we want to pay attention to that and look at the many different skills that we can do. We'll talk about a couple of those today as well. So progressive muscle relaxation. I already showed you, the ball with like a breathing exercise. There are a lot of apps and stuff out there too that I think do a really nice job, like Headspace, things like that. I'm not a huge techie person, but there's a gazillion of them out there for people to check out. I personally practice a lot of meditation and yoga and things like that and find that it really helps to kind of keep my sanity. I just burned a little sage in my office right before we got started today, just because it really reminds me, since I use that when I meditate, I bring that into other situations and it really helps me to stay focused, stay calm, do what I need to do. So it's important to kind of know yourself, develop some of these strategies, and the more you practice them, the quicker they benefit you. So people always ask me about like relaxation, for instance, and we usually wait until we're totally freaked out before we use relaxation, like having a panic attack and then trying to breathe. Right? It doesn't tend to work that well. Relaxation and a lot of these skills, you have to think of them kind of like oil changes on the car, right? We don't wait until our engine starts clinking and clanking until we get oil changes on the car, hopefully. We do that as regular maintenance so that our engine becomes less clinkety clankety. We're doing that routine maintenance. We have to do that for ourselves too. So, and that's really where these skills benefit us. So, there's a nice list there. We'll cover a few of them in more detail today. On the motor part of SCAMP, that's awareness training. And that's a really important thing, especially now, because maybe you've done self-monitoring and things like that in the past, and given kind of current circumstances, or you're in different environments, like you're at home all the time, right? Maybe your BFRB used to really occur at work and you're kind of working on that and had your things set up on your desk at work, or you're less likely to pick or pull in front of other people or bite. But now, you might be home alone, right? So, or around family or people who maybe you feel a little more comfortable with engaging in a BFRB. And if you're trying to decrease that BFRB, then you might have to do a little self-monitoring right now, because the game might have changed a little bit on when and where your BFRB is coming up. And so that's a really important thing to pay attention to. Take just a little bit of time. Do a little self-monitoring. A lot of people don't like to self-monitor. That's okay. You don't have to do it forever. Maybe try it for just like a week or two, or even if you could just do it for 3 days. You're probably going to get some good information that comes out of that. So I would encourage you to try that. This one too on the motor modality also talks about blockers, things that make it more difficult to engage in a BFRB. That's great, especially when your BFRB is more of an unfocused type, right? So, or automatic when you're not aware of it, and maybe, you're working on stuff on your computer more than you usually do. So, and you notice, your hands are up in your hair, or, picking your skin, or you're biting your lip more, or things like that. That's where we might have to first, without awareness. And that's where we might have to first kind of buy ourselves some time. So, because if we have something that I like even more than Band-Aids is this like tape But you can just use Scotch tape if that's all that you have right now. That's fine. And you know, oftentimes thumbs for pulling are involved. Put in a little tape. It's not going to be impossible to pull, but it makes it a lot more difficult. And what that does is that when you start to realize, oh, I can't get a hold of it. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm trying not to pull. So, or cover up your picking fingers. So if you, and I know most of us are really talented and we can engage in a BFRB using multiple fingers. That's okay. Maybe tape a wall up or use a blocker, or wear your hair in a different way, or a hat. Wear clothes that make it harder, to get at those places. Because what it'll do is it'll help buy you some time, right? So then you can take a look at, oh, okay, I'm in a trigger situation here. And like I said, with changing times, maybe it's different than what it was before. So it's really good to be aware of that. Use some of those blockers as well. A lot of people don't like blockers, and I'll tell you what, blockers alone don't tend to work. And the example that I give to people when they're trying to control a BFRB by just wearing gloves or just wearing a hat or something like that. I mean, it's not bad. It's still a good strategy, but it's kind of like trying to stop your stomach from growling by just pushing on it, right? So it might help for a little while, but your body, just like a growling stomach, your BFRB is telling you that it needs something too, okay? So, and that's why, today I'm so happy to be doing this talk about anxiety and emotional coping, because for a good number of people with BFRBs, that growling stomach, that tendency to want to engage in a BFRB might serve the function of emotional regulation. So it's really good to pay attention to that. Okay, I got so many things I want to say. The next thing is competing responses. This is just, doing other self-care. And this is something I honestly do find to be helpful for a lot of people. So if you engage in skin picking behavior, having a new routine of taking care of your skin, or paint your nails, paint your toenails, do some like nice lotion or things like that, or essential oils or something on your skin or in your hair can feel really, really nice. And it's kind of this grooming instinct that we're using in a different way other than with a BFRB. And that too can be really helpful. Knitting, doing other things with your hands too, I think can be great. Exercise, absolutely. It's going to help with BFRBs. It's also going to help decrease some of that anxiety, boredom, things like that as well. Now, if you're not a big exerciser, that's fine. Maybe dance around in your room a little bit, or if you can go outside for a walk, depending on where you live and all of those things. But I think it is really important to still do some sort of exercise. That doesn't always mean 45 minutes on the elliptical machine. Exercise and body movement can happen in a lot of different ways. The last modality on SCAMP is place. And this is our, environment, time of day, location, the particular activity, right? So I'm sitting in my office right now. It's 1 o'clock Central Time. And it's like 17 degrees outside in Fargo, North Dakota. Little cold. This is what I'm doing right now. So I'm very aware of what my environment is. And if I'm picking or pulling in this environment, I want to pay attention to that. So, am I using tools? Am I looking into a mirror in that environment? So do I have really bright lights so I can see everything really closely? We want to pay attention to that, because we can do stimulus control or changing up that environment a little bit, covering mirrors, getting rid of tools that are used, taking your tweezers, freezing them in a block of ice can be a great strategy. You still got them, but they're kind of hard to get to. Things like that can be super helpful. Especially for children, this last one, and some adults too really like this, is contingency management, and that's a reward model. So I personally tend to focus more on rewards rather than punishments. So, and rewards are used for the use of strategies. I never encourage people to use rewards based on like, oh, yay, you got your eyelashes back, here's a new video game. But it's something to be able to say, okay, wow, you earned 50 points these last couple of weeks, working hard, using relaxation, having blockers, having good coach thoughts, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So using fidget toys, and we counted all of those strategies up and you got 50 points, hooray. If when we use the strategies, hair and skin tends to take care of itself. So that's really what we focus on when we're doing a lot of the emotional coping stuff. So that's what contingency management should look like. So so we are gonna talk just a little bit more about the specifics of the strategy, but maybe I should pause here and see if people have any questions.
I saw we had a hand raised from Naomi. If you have a question, just as Leslie reminded everyone, if you could please post it in the chat. Okay, we have one from Jane. Is that book that you had at the start the main book that you would recommend?
I think that there are a lot of great books on BFRBs. This is a recent one, and the things that I am particularly talking about today, like the SCAMP model, are out of this book. Overcoming Body-Focused Repetitive Behaviors, a Comprehensive Behavioral Treatment for Hair Pulling and Skin Picking by Charles Mansueto, Sherry Baberchek, Ruth Gollum. So, so this one is going to talk about a lot of the ones that I talk about, but there are some other really fantastic books. And I think I'm not sure if there's a link on the TLC website or not. There used to be for books and resources. But I think, there's so many books now, which is exciting. There used to be like 2. Now when you look at it, there are many that people have written, especially over the last couple of years. But this is one treatment-wise that I use a lot.
Okay, thank you for that. We have one more question. The tactile aspect has always been a struggle for me. I get zeroed in on the feel of a specific hair. It's like I become obsessed with it. Are there any suggestions for combining strategies in these situations?
I think that it's, okay, so can you read that one more time?
Of course. This person says, the tactile aspect has always been a struggle for me. They get zeroed in on the feel of the specific hair and they feel like they become obsessed with it. Do you have any suggestions for combining strategies in these situations?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. And one that I think a lot of other people can identify with too is kind of for hair pulling, like this trick trance that happens, that it can be, pulling out a hair and really like just studying that. It's like a mindfulness exercise, right? So that it's just really focused in on that. And a lot of times our brain, because of what we're going through during the day, it just needs a break. And to have something like that that's silky and interesting, or maybe bumpy, or maybe there's a root on it, or there's something about that hair that just is amazing, right? So what we want to do when you find that there's a particular thing like that that you like, is trying to do some sort of substitution for it. I'm trying to see if I have it here. So what I'll do for that oftentimes is I'll have people do, I don't have my dental floss in front of me, but to take a piece of dental floss instead. Or another thing that I have is hair samples that I get from like the hair salons or things like that. And to just, instead of your own hair, using something like that, it's not going to be the same, it's not going to be as good, but it's the next best thing. To be able to kind of engage in that type of behavior with something other than your own hair, or a piece of string or a piece of silk, or if you like the bumps, then it is taking a piece of, maybe thread and tying some knots in it and get that, kind of feeling that comes along with it. So I think that that's one element that you can do. And I like that they mentioned, what else can I combine with it? So often with BFRBs, people just try one thing. They just try the blockers. They just try the sensory substitutes. treating BFRBs effectively, usually you have to view it kind of like building a house, right? We need more than just a hammer to build a house. We need more than just a fidget toy to treat a BFRB. So do this, get the sensory substitute maybe in another way, but it's also going to be great. Maybe that for this particular individual, when they find that that zoning out is something that is very kind of relaxing and calming for them, maybe you're a great candidate for practicing meditation and mindfulness. And that can be another way, to do next best thing. I always say engaging in hair pulling and skin picking is kind of like eating a pan full of chocolate brownies, right? So tastes so good, feels like the right thing to do at the time, but then there's the consequences afterwards. Afterwards, we're, too much sugar. So it's important to know that, like, our strategies are kind of like the chicken and broccoli, right? The chicken and broccoli are going to fill us up. They're going to give us the nutrients that our body really needs. And then when it comes time for the brownies, we can either say no completely, or we don't need as many brownies because we're already filled up on chicken and broccoli. And that's where these fidget toys and these strategies come in. Let's face it, BFRBs, they work for a lot of people, short term on being able to regulate emotion, check out for a little while, engage in this BFRB behavior, which in the short term, not everybody, but a lot of people report great satisfaction, and accomplishment and calmness during that time. So I say, when we've had a bad day and we're really anxious, sometimes it's kind of like BFRB, like dives in to save the day, kind of like the friend that doesn't always give us the best advice, right? So, and that's where when we have those other skills, chicken and broccoli, whatever, we can say thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to do this instead. And of course that takes training. So it takes, building up, but I'll tell you what, it works. So, I see a lot of people get really good control over their BFRBs, and some, stop completely. But I also don't want people to get super hyper focused on success only means stopping your hair pulling or skin picking or lip biting or whatever your nose picking, whatever your BFRB is. Some people, it's more to get, your sense of self back again and to feel good about yourself and your appearance. Doesn't matter what your skin looks like, what your hair looks like. So, or to practice other life skills, or dealing with other business in our life that kind of fuels that BFRB, right? So if we're in toxic relationships or struggle with a comorbid anxiety disorder like OCD or generalized anxiety, or have some trauma background or things like that, that oftentimes is like giving fuel to our BFRB. So we want to take a look at those things too. And that's where these affective skills are so important, to be able to recognize that anxiety, recognize this other stuff that's fueling the BFRB. And we're going to be so much more successful on not only decreasing the BFRB, but just feeling so much better as a human being in general. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. I'll pause for a minute, see if there's any questions.
Sure, we have another question. Can you recommend any strategies for interrupting a picking or pulling session? Most strategies seem to focus on preventing to start with an episode, and these of course also make sense, but interrupting would also be crucial. The strategies I know, counting backwards and leaving the situation, those are some, but do you have any others that you recommend to clients?
Yeah, I think interrupting a session, we definitely want to try, right? So, and when you do notice that you're in a high risk situation, and maybe it's something you can't avoid, it's like, okay, I have to check my emails or I have to do this thing. So, and then you notice that it starts to happen, as quickly as you can, trying to have things around you so that you can refocus your efforts, right? So, and then kind of checking in with yourself to be like, oh, it's like BFRB just walked in the room. What do you want? Like, what do you need right now? So, and I think that's an important thing. So it's not just about like, okay, let me use the fidget toy instead. That can be a great way to kind of redirect that behavior from, whatever is, whether it's, whatever we're doing, right? So, is to try to catch ourselves. It's harder, of course. That's why there's so much emphasis put on prevention, because if we can catch it before it starts, just like the chocolate brownies, right? It's easier to not eat any than it is to eat like a couple. And especially once we've eaten 3, we say, screw it, I'm going to eat the rest of the pan anyway. And that's where like some cognitive and strategies and things like that are going to be important. Because if we are having the, screw it types of thoughts, I've already, pulled, or I've already picked, what difference does it make? That's when we want to intervene with cognitive strategies. So we can use any of the SCAMP examples, not only to prevent and take care of ourselves, before or after, but also during a BFRB episode.
I think that's all the questions we have for now.
Okay, well, I will keep going then. So I'm going to try to share a screen again here for a second. So bear with me. Okay. So we're back to this. So I want to talk a little bit about the cognitive modality. Can you guys see this okay?
I think you could zoom in a little bit more. There we go. That's great.
Okay, great. So I don't see it on my screen. It doesn't come up, so it's hard for me. Whoopsie. It's hard for me to know. So this also isn't mine, but I'm taking the liberty to share it with you all today. This is a list of cognitive distortions, all right? So cognitive distortion sounds really like messed up, like distorted thinking, but we all have them. It's just unhelpful thoughts, right? So, or sometimes I'll refer to them as like bad coach thinking. So it's something that we want to look at and recognize, what am I telling myself in the first place about what's going on in the world in general, about my life, about my BFRB, whatever it is. So the first one on here is all or nothing thinking. So seeing things in black or white categories. So either I'm completely BFRB free or I'm totally out of control with it, right? So either I never get COVID-19 or I'm gonna die, right? So we wanna look at, there's a lot of space in between with so many things. So it's really important to be able to catch ourselves when we're an all or nothing thinker. So I either have to get an A in all of my classes or I'm a bad student. I mean, there's so many ways that all or nothing thinking can manifest, even like with cleaning or things like that too. We want to kind of look at that in between, because we can so easily go to the all or the absolutely nothing and get paralyzed. So it's good to catch that when we have it. Overgeneralization is the next one. This is where we see a single negative event as a never-ending pattern. And I think that's something that happens both with BFRBs and our current health crisis that we have right now too. Like, oh my God, how long is this gonna last? How long do I have to homeschool my child, right? How long do I have to, I'm forever gonna struggle with the BFRB. We want to catch those types of thoughts because they don't have to be true, right? So we can problem solve. We can also sit with some uncertainty. So it's something that most things have an end. That's impermanence, right? So everything ends at some point. And so it's important to understand that. And luckily with the BFRB, there's things that we can do to take care of ourselves. Luckily with COVID-19, there's some things, that we can do to try to take care of ourselves in our communities. And with anxiety, there's a lot of things that we can do there too. So, and this is one of them, being able to recognize toxic thoughts. Mental filters, the next one, where we pick out a single detail about ourselves or a situation and dwell on that exclusively. And I love the example that they give here, that it's like a drop of ink that discolors an entire beaker of water, right? So even though, everybody's life is a little different right now, it doesn't mean that everything has to suck. It doesn't mean that everything is horrible. I had a pretty fun morning at home with my daughter. So we rearranged our office. We're getting ready to homeschool. We put together a schedule, played with the dog, so I wasn't expecting that. That wasn't what I thought I would be doing this morning. But that's what it is. And so it's being able to pay attention to that. And it doesn't have to be negative. I don't have to have a negative thought to be like, oh my gosh, how long is this going to last for? I'm going to get so bored at home. We want to catch that. A lot of these thoughts too, you'll notice that there's some crossover between them. The next one is disqualifying the positive. That's something, I'm a Midwesterner, So we're like experts at disqualifying positives. So if somebody gives you a compliment, like, oh, Dr. Reinardy, I like your shirt. I'd be like, oh, this, I've had it forever. I think I got it on clearance. You know, like right away, it's brushing a positive under the rug. We want to catch ourselves with that. So instead, if somebody gives us a compliment, hey, I like your shirt, you're like, oh, thanks, I like it too. That's okay. So whether it's something that we're wearing or an attribute about ourselves, or I think another one that's hard when we have BFRBs, if somebody gives you a compliment about appearance, it's like, oh yeah, well, you don't really know. Take the compliment. So know that the BFRB is still a sliver that makes up who you are as a total human being, and how other people perceive you and experience you, and how you should experience yourself. And so it's really important that we don't disqualify the positive. And I don't want to put BFRBs as an all negative thing either. There's some really amazing things that have happened as the result of people having BFRBs. So I don't want to classify that as a negative, but I know a lot of people do experience it as a negative thing. Jumping to conclusions. This is, you know, we tend to be masters of this too, mind reading, right? So that if I had a picking episode and, you know, I go out or somebody sees me, they're going to be like, oh my God, they're going to think I'm on meth, or, oh my gosh, everyone's going to notice this, right? So we don't know what other people are thinking. So it's really important that we try to catch ourselves when we're doing that mind reading on other people. The fortune telling error, this is just where we anticipate that things will turn out badly, even though we don't always have evidence for that, right? So, you know, just like with the COVID-19 stuff, that, you know, this fortune telling error tends to build a lot of anxiety, right? So it's being able to say, we don't know, you know, we're doing the best that we can. What can I do personally? We'll talk about that in just a second, on how to identify, challenge, and replace these different toxic thoughts. So, but we want to catch ourselves if we're doing that fortune telling error. Magnification and minimization, this is where we exaggerate the importance of things. So it's kind of like this, we tend to always do this upward comparison. So we compare ourselves to somebody else that we think has it all together, right? So that we blow up their accomplishments and we minimize our own accomplishments. So we blow up our own imperfections and we minimize their imperfections. So you want to pay attention to that whenever we're doing that grass is the greener on the other side type of thinking. We don't know anything about their grass. It doesn't do any good for us to focus on their grass. We have to focus on our own, right? So, and if we pay a little attention to that and nurture it, our grass is going to grow a little better. Catastrophizing. This is, I mean, all these things are so relevant to our current time, and also, you know, can to just about any area of life. This is where we pick the extreme horrible consequences, right? So, you know, that, you know, a life of utter isolation, which, you know, this was written a long time ago. So it's kind of funny that isolation is something that a lot of people are experiencing right now. But being turned down from a date means that no one's ever going to love us. You know, I'll never have a relationship ever. You know, this is all going to end so badly for me. We want to catch that. So I always say I'm going to end up living in a van down by the river. I'm actually kind of a hippie. I wouldn't mind that, but a lot of people maybe wouldn't. So we want to catch catastrophic thinking when it's there. The next one is emotional reasoning. And this one I see all the time, especially with BFRBs. If you have OCD or, you know, just, I don't know, I think just being human in general. I feel it, therefore it's true, right? So I'm mad, they did something wrong. So I'm scared, it's the end of the world. You know, I feel an urge, I gotta engage in my BFRB. Feeling is not fact. So it's really important to catch ourselves when we're just floating on emotion, right? So we gotta use multiple sources of information. And I think before our world was so complex, you know, caveman days, we probably could follow our emotions a little bit more, and it was relevant to the times. But now there's so many false alarms and things that are going on. We're so overstimulated. Our emotions end up all over the place unless we take that time to kind of settle them down with other emotional coping skills like meditation, relaxation, things like that kind of tame our emotions a little bit. But a lot of times we're just following them. Our emotions are pulling us around by the nose, right? So we want to recognize that when we have that tendency. The next one here is should statements. So I would say we shouldn't should on ourselves. So catch words like should, must, always, never, because these are just examples of overgeneralization. And if should like helps us, like, oh, I was out, I should go wash my hands, and we do, great. But if it's like, oh, you know, it's real cold out today, but it's sunny, maybe I should go for a 5-mile run. I'm not gonna go for a 5-mile run, right? Like, no way. But if I'm shooting on myself, I'm just gonna feel really bad and guilty and things like that. Then that can be a trigger for my, whoop, my light's going out, a trigger for my BFRB. Well, that was interesting. Anyway, I'm a little darker here, sorry. Great timing, my light bulb just went out. It shouldn't stay on. Labeling and mislabeling. This is just another form of overgeneralization. So this is where we just name call, right? So I'm a loser, I'm dumb, I'm ugly, you know, whatever it is that we're telling ourselves. Too tall, too short, too fat, too thin, too this, not enough of that. That doesn't do anybody any good. So it's really important to recognize when we're having those types of thoughts too. So because they're just not going to benefit us. I'm going to turn on the flashlight on my phone and see if that helps. Okay, Google, turn on flashlight. Turning flashlight on. I love technology. Yeah, I'm in the light again. Right. The last one is personalization. This is where we see negative events is somehow impacting us, right? Or is somehow being the result of us. And so this is a really important thing to catch too. This is like hyper responsibility. So if somebody around us is grumpy, thinking, oh my gosh, they must be mad at me, I must have done something wrong, right? So, and you could see where a lot of these different, and there's the source. So from these authors, Burns and Pearsons, who do a lot of cognitive psychology. So even though this is older, also relevant. And, you know, this is a list of all of the cognitive distortions we can have. There's many of them, but these tend to hit on the more common ones. So did these sound familiar to anybody? I guess raise your hand if you've noticed any of those things before. So yeah, I think it's something, you know, I'll pause for just a second and then we'll talk about what to do with these thoughts. Any questions or comments up to this point? Otherwise, I'll just keep on cruising. All right, I'll just keep on going. I'm gonna go back to my share screen because I can. I've gotten so good at technology. Well, maybe we wouldn't go that far. Getting better at technology. Okay, now watch this. Whoops. Okay, I shouldn't speak so quickly. Okay, here we go. Now this is a worksheet that I use with my clients. I'm gonna blow it up a little bit here, maybe a lot. To look at, can you guys see that okay? Hopefully, yes. All right. I'm not getting any feedback, so I'm just going to keep going. So this worksheet, once we have some of those, once we're able to recognize some of those thoughts, then we can start to challenge them. So we take a look at like, okay, what was the situation, right? Let's see, can I move this over? Holy cow, I can. All right. So situation, what was the situation that was influenced by or the result of the automatic thought? So certainly kind of how things go right now in our world, people can, we can look at, oh my gosh, I just watched the news. This is what they said, right? So automatic thought, I'm so scared. I'm so anxious. I don't know what to do. Da, 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 da. What if somebody I love? What if I get this? Who's going to take care of me? All of these concerns that come up. And I'm not saying that they're, that they're not maybe true, but they're not helpful. And so that's why we label it as, what's the unhelpful thought, and how much do I believe it? I'm a behavioralist, so I like to measure everything, because later we can go back and look at, maybe right now I believe that thought 90%, but maybe down the road I only believe it like 40%, right? So I'm not going to be able to take care of myself, or whatever the situation is. I'm never going to be able to get control over my BFRB. And so it's important to pay attention to whatever the situation is, whether it's just anxiety in general or specific to our BFRB. I gave the example earlier of, one of the thoughts, somebody had posted the comment about like, okay, what do I do when I'm in the middle of a pulling episode? That it's like, okay, situation, I'm in the middle of a pulling episode. Well, I've been pulling so long already. What's the difference? Maybe, maybe I'll start tomorrow, right? So that's an example of an automatic thought. We're not trying to have that thought. It's automatic. Bam, there it is, right? So that's what happens with automatic thoughts. So, and there's lots of reasons to that I'm not going to get into right now. But we have anywhere between 50 and 80,000 thoughts in a given day is kind of what I'd seen learning about cognitive psychology. So it's, there's a lot going on up there. We're not aware of every single thought that we have, but they still influence us. It's this running script. It's our running soap opera that we have. Read the script as much as we can. We're not going to be able to read all 50 to 80,000 thoughts, but let's pay attention to the ones that we can, right? Keep the ones that are useful for us, modify the ones that are not. So, but first we got to know what we're dealing with. And that's what we do here. We write down all these automatic thoughts, right? So with the BFRB example, I've already started pulling. I'm not going to stop. I'll just try later. What difference does it make anyway? Blah, whatever it is. So we want to pay attention to that. How much do I believe it? And then what feeling was produced by that thought? I would say, what kind of therapist would I be if I didn't say, how does that make you feel? So this is my chance. So take a look at the thought. How does that thought make you feel? All right. So were you angry, frustrated, sad? Sometimes it can be positive thoughts. When we give ourselves permission, it's like, oh, good, I don't have to work on that right now. If we're procrastinating on something or giving ourselves permission to engage in our BFRB. So we want to pay attention to that. And again, rate it. You can either use 0 to 100 or 0 to 10. How intense were those emotions? You don't have to use the numbers if you don't want to, but I like my clients to do it just so we can go back and rate these things and take a look at them later. So these first 3 steps are big. This is where we, what's the situation? What's the automatic thought? What feeling was produced by that thought? And I even sometimes, look at, well, what behavior resulted from that too? So how did that impact, kind of our response? And so I'll sometimes have people write that down in here too. Once we have an idea of what we're dealing with, we've done step 1, identify. Now we can do step 2, challenge. Is the automatic thought true, right? So sometimes thoughts can be true, but they're not helpful. That's why the second one is there. So is it true? Yes, no, maybe. Is it helpful? If we're working on it, usually not. And is there another way of thinking about it? Almost always, yes, there is. And then enters rational response. This is the more positive, realistic, or problem-solving way to deal with the situation, right? So in some things like what's going on in our world right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So, but it doesn't do me any good to worry, to just sit and, worry about that and bite my fingernails or pull my hair or pick my skin. That's not going to help anything in this situation. So it's being able to look at what can I do instead to take care of myself and my emotions? What can I do instead to look at what do I have control over, right? So how do I give myself kind of a feeling of being prepared? That's why I organized my office and did stuff at home today, because that's something I can do. There's a lot of unknowns moving ahead. I don't know how long I'm going to be doing telehealth with my clients. I closed my practice seeing people in person yesterday, which kind of sucks. I love seeing people in person, but what's the next best thing? Telehealth. And that's where I set up my website and did all kinds of things to make it easier for my clients, set up my home office, did some things in my office here at work. And so there's a lot of things that we can do. That's taking a problem solving model rather than staying stuck and scared and dealing with all of that anxiety. It helps to be able to be doing things that are productive, structuring our day, taking a look at when am I getting up. I did this with my 8-year-old. We wrote out a whole structure on what her day looks like. This is when she gets up, we eat breakfast, we do chores, we work on reading, math, science, these other days we do these other things. We go for a walk, we meditate, so we laid out our whole day. I don't know that we're going to follow it exactly, but we followed it pretty close. And that's been really helppful to have that structure. That's problem solving. It's a more positive, realistic way to deal with the situation. I don't want to lie to myself here. So if the situation is friends invite me to go play basketball and I have the thought I really stink at basketball, makes me feel insecure. Is it true? Yes, I do stink at basketball. Is it helpful? Not really. Is there another way to think about it? Yes. So I don't want to tell myself here, oh, I'm actually great at basketball. I think that's where a lot of people get frustrated with positive affirmations, is they don't really believe them. They're so far away from where they currently are. And so, make it realistic. So for me, okay, it doesn't help to just tell myself I stink at basketball. Maybe what I can tell myself is like, hey, you know what? I'm going to have more time on my hands. Maybe I'll watch some tutorials on basketball. Maybe I'll take the basketball from our garage and bounce it around a little bit, right? So maybe I will, go to the park by our house and shoot some hoops and see if I get a little better at it. Maybe I'll watch a tutorial on doing a layup shot. That's taking it to a problem solving, realistic, and more positive way. And then we will look at how much we believe that. It's okay if you don't believe it a lot. The other script, the automatic, unhelpful script, has gotten a lot more practice. Just like anything, we got to act, a new character role. That's going to take a little rehearsal. These seeds need a little bit of watering. That's all right. As we practice it, this will start to become more believable. So even if you believe it 30%, that's okay. Write it down. Try to practice these things. If it's somewhat realistic and it's problem solving and positive, go for it. And then the last column on there is feeling. Again, how does that make you feel? So what's the feeling that's produced by this? And that's, by this new rational response or good coach thought. And to be able to rate that and take a look at it. Sometimes we instantly feel better. Sometimes we recognize, all right, with a little bit of practice with this new script, I'm going to probably feel a lot better. So, or in more control of my BFRB, or being able to handle some of the uncertainty that we're all living in right now. So that's a little bit about cognitive restructuring, which again I think is an awesome skill. So I'll close this. I'll pause for a minute. Any comments or questions, concerns about any of that?
No comments or questions yet, but
Okay.
if we do have about 7 minutes remaining, so I do encourage all attendees. Jude says that this is fabulous. That was her comment.
Thanks, Jude. Mwah.
And so if there are any attendees that have last minute questions or things that they would like Dr. Reinardy to speak about, this is definitely the time. You can send your questions or comments in privately, or you can send them to everyone so that they're visible. But we do encourage you to use this time to ask.
All right, and if questions come up, I'll pause again at the end for a little bit. Just if there's a couple last minute questions. Otherwise, people can feel free to contact me directly too. I'm pretty easy to find. lakesidecenter.org is my website. It has my information on it. So other ways to cope with anxiety, I think looking at what our fears are in general too, I think we can use exposure therapy sometimes too. When we're having intrusive, like these unwanted, repetitive, ruminative thoughts that just will not leave our mind, it doesn't tend to work to just try to push them away. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about that. Because if we have any amount of anxiety in our brain, the more we try to push it away and do the I don't want to think about that, the more our brain goes, think about what? What are you trying not to think about? What's on the other side of the wall? What are you scared of? And that's why we get stuck in these ruminative patterns. And so if you notice that you're having sticky thoughts and you just can't shake them, write them down. So write them down a lot. So if I have a thought and I'm really scared, maybe I'm afraid my grandma is going to get COVID-19 or something like that, I can write that thought down. I'm afraid my grandma's going to get COVID-19, right? So, or I'm afraid that this, event that's going on in the world is going to make my BFRB worse, or this event has made my BFRB worse and it's never going to end. We can sit with that thought a little bit. If it's not working to do the cognitive restructuring that we just talked about, or if it packs too much of a punch and we can't even think of another rational response, it might mean that that emotion is a little too high. Take that scary thought and write it down. Now, if it feels like on a 1 to 10 scale, my grandma could get sick with COVID-19. 1 is easy and 10 is extremely difficult. And maybe that's like an 8, maybe a little too hard. Maybe I modify it a little bit. My grandma will recover from COVID-19, or my grandma could get this, but she'll recover from COVID-19. So it's something that we can take a look at what that thought is, break it down a little bit, and then look at it under our control. We're not pushing it away. We're bringing it forward and we're sitting there with it. What happens is this process of habituation. That thought will lose its punch a little bit with that repetition. And so try to sit with that thought, give yourself a little repetition with it, then try to do the cognitive restructuring if the cognitive restructuring didn't work the first time. So that worksheet that we just talked about. So exposure therapy can be really helpful. This is what we do for phobias, right? So if somebody is afraid of spiders, now I don't throw 10 tarantulas on them the fourth, session or something like that, right? So we start off looking at a cute little, cartoon of Lucas the spider or something like that. So, or the little cute stuffed animals that I have of spiders. And that's where we start. And then we gradually build up to the National Geographic spiders, and you may eventually, in the past anyway, I've taken people to the zoo to go look at our tarantula that we have there. So we can build up to our fear too. It's okay, and please do start easier if you're having scary thoughts like that, or if you have anxiety about other things. Even just writing, if you're worried about COVID-19, just writing COVID-19 and taking a look at that, can be an exposure for people who are, feeling really avoidant. And that's I want to say this too. Be sure that you're limiting, like how much news you're watching and all that. And I just didn't build that in so much to this talk because I feel like everybody's being told that, but it really is important. And, like stay informed, have just a couple sources that you're looking at, and like live the rest of your day, right? So follow the guidelines that are put in place. But now is not the time to just stay glued in front of the television nonstop. So have a party a little bit. I mean, granted, we're by ourselves, but that's okay. Or the online party that I heard a little bit about that you guys had yesterday, which is fantastic. So what a beautiful way to connect with one another, and what a great way to spend our time. So stay informed, but don't be obsessed, I think is an important goal to work toward on that. So the relaxation stuff, and I know we're about at time, the relaxation stuff is going to be really important for people to take a look at too. So just working on slowing our breathing, and again, use it like oil changes on the car. Don't do it when you're in full panic. I mean, you could try to do it when you're in full panic mode, but it's going to work a lot better if you practice 3 to 5 minutes of breathing a couple times a day. Now, I know most people don't do that, but even if you do it once a day, that's going to help a lot. And if you compare it with an activity that you already do, like right before bed or when you're making your breakfast or something like that, fantastic. And then it just becomes part of your sequence to your day. And that's how we want to use all of these skills, not just as some like quirky thing that you like make yourself do, but to really build it into your everyday life. And of course, that takes a little time. So be compassionate, be patient with yourself as you're learning these skills, but also stay motivated because they do help. So they help with anxiety in general. And because of that, they're going to help with your BFRB. So, okay, let me pause these last couple of minutes and take any questions that folks may have.
Perfect. So we do have a few questions. I think we're only going to have time to get to a few of them. But one of them is, I know I'm only responsible for me, but what if I'm managing my thoughts, but someone around me, it feels like they're pushing them into me?
Well, that's a great question because we call those toxic interjects, right? So where other people around us are, having these toxic thoughts or giving us toxic feedback, we especially need to try to do what we can to turn that around and know what they're saying is, be a mirror, right? So whatever they're putting onto us is probably what's going on with them more than it is what's going on with us. And so it's important to kind of do our own restructuring on that. And then if we can, trying to practice assertiveness. And there's lots of great resources out there on assertiveness as well. Sherry Vavacek, who wrote this book, also wrote a book on compassion and assertiveness. I can't remember the exact title. But if you're somebody who struggles with assertiveness and telling other people like, hey, you know what, that doesn't help me. And looking at, at relationships that can be difficult. And where we can distance ourselves with those relationships and establish boundaries, that's going to be a really good goal.
Great. And then I think we only have time for one more question, and I think it's an important one. If there's only one thing you want our patient community to take away from this session and remember, what would it be?
I think, oh my gosh, one thing, first of all, I think working with folks with BFRBs, definitely best human beings ever. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. But I would say that the number one thing is know that like the building a house analogy, it takes multiple tools. So be patient with yourself as you learn to use these different tools. And just like building a house, it can get a little complicated, but it's not impossible. So this is something that you can learn how to do. Find the right help, and keep looking for the right resources for yourself, so that you can, have this great community that we have, and there's some fantastic skills out there to help along the way.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for all of your insight and words of compassion and education. We're about at time. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who submitted questions. Thank you to Habit Aware for sponsoring us, and definitely a huge thanks to Dr. Renae Reinardy. And again, like I posted in the chat, you can go to lakesidecenter.org to get more information about her. Thank you so much, Dr. Reinardy.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.